Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. So where we're going to be picking up today is at the very bottom paragraph of page 108. And I'll say that again. Hey, page 108, very bottom paragraph. And we're right in the middle of the chapter, Two Wives. And so, very, very, very bottom of the page. And what we're diving into is actually, you might be like, oh no, we're into wives. Thank you for staying. Not like, leave meeting. But where we're picking up is actually a really interesting point of the book. Now, we're going to describe 4 different types of drinkers. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Not all the way controversial, but I'll let you know. I believe that these 4 types are more useful than the 5 types that are mentioned in the doctor's opinion. Ooh, she's controversial. Ooh. And hopefully that'll be like just titillating enough for you to stick it out with me. And, believe it or not, what we're going to cover and review is a lot of really useful step 1 information. So we're going to be looking at stuff that is useful for diagnosing our own alcoholism and looking at what is the nature of the illness of alcoholism. And so we're going to kick it off, bottom paragraph 108. So the problem with which you struggle usually falls within one of 4 categories. 1, your husband may be only a heavy drinker. So type 1 is not an alcoholic. Now, if you remember back on page 21, we saw the description of the moderate drinker, the hard drinker. Now, in that description, what we saw is the hard drinker. They might have the habit badly enough to impair us, hurt us physically, slow us up mentally. But if we're given a sufficiently strong reason, such as ill health, falling in love, warning of a doctor, that sort of thing, we can stop or moderate. So type 1 is a hard drinker. And let's have a look at this. And we're now at the top of page 109. For those that just joined, welcome. So glad you're here. It says his drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. So it might be constant drinking, but that lack of control might only happen here and there, or the appearance of lack of control might happen here or there. Perhaps he spends too much money on liquor. Now, I know none of us can relate to that. Overspending on alcohol. Now, I will say, what's the difference between an alcoholic and a heavy drinker? Well, the heavy drinker is spending too much money on alcohol. Now, the alcoholic, what we feel like is we're spending too much money on rent and groceries, That's where we're spending too much money. That's just a joke. All right. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he doesn't see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle his liquor, that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. The world is full of people like him. Now, the takeaway for what we're describing through the lens of 2 wives, because the lens of what we're looking at in this part of the chapter, welcome, we're on page 109. We're describing the first type of drinker. Type 1, while we can say not at this point necessarily an alcoholic, looks like a hard drinker, type 1 does not think they have a problem. And type 1 has no desire to change. Now that is important. So as we go through this chapter, what we're after is seeking a deeper and new experience. So if you're sitting here today and you think Two Wives is about women being frumpy and putting up with their bad behaving husbands, I would encourage us to look deeper. What this chapter is about. It is for those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. For those who are unable to quit the alcoholic just like I couldn't quit alcohol. For those who are as hopeless in their predicament attached to people like me as I was hopelessly attached to alcohol. And so we can use this when we're looking and we're working with sponsees. Even if we are sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are the real deal alcoholic, we can gauge what their level of desire is. Like gauging that level of a desire where it's like, yeah, I don't think I have a problem and I don't want to stop. And as we go through, we're going to read the 4 different types of drinkers. And we're going to be given instructions on how we can best help those drinkers. So we're going to be given directions on how to help somebody who's not open for a solution. And again, this is going to radically contextualize. Now, if you're here today, I have a feeling, I said this at the earlier study, listen, if you're debating about whether or not you're an alcoholic, I promise you, spending time with me is the last resort of the truly hopeless. Like I love you and I am so glad you're here, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, you got no other options than hanging out with me on a Wednesday. And I'm glad you're here. And so you guys have this thing. You guys are not type 1, but you might have some people in your life that maybe are type 1, where they have a problem and they're not open. And even whether that problem is alcoholism or not, a problem in their life that I'm concerned about, and they don't want to change. Does that maybe sound familiar? And does that maybe look at how we can contextualize this in some radically new ways? So, the world is full of people like him, people that, they're drinking, but they don't think they have a problem. They might not even have a problem. It says some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. And if we pop over to page 21, what we're going to see is mirrored the progression that we're seeing in these 4 types of drinkers. So if you'll indulge me a moment, on page 21, last week we were doing a whole lot of bouncing around. It'll be less bouncy, but I'm so glad you're here today. So on page 21, first full paragraph, it says, what about the real alcoholic? Well, he may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about, for many of us, not necessarily all of us, but for many of us, there was a progressive, we all experience progression. And to be honest, as soon as I ever drank, it became apparent that it was a problem. I mean, more to people around me than to me, but I had the allergy from the get-go. But if you're here today and you're thinking about I don't know, Paige, I remember a time back in 84, back in 73, back in 68, back in 2016, back in 2019, where I had 3 drinks like a lady. Now, I joke about drinking like a lady just means pinkies up, but the successful drinking, what that means is drinking with dry pants in both your shoes. What we remember is those few exceptions where we went out and we drank and we controlled it. But if we look at our experience, that was early on in our drinking careers. And there was a time where it progressed. And many of us experience an invisible line that we cross, where once we had control and choice, we no longer had control and choice. And so what it's saying on page 109 is it's pointing to that progressive nature, that there are people who are hard drinkers and they have the ability to choose whether they will drink or not. They're able to stop or they're able to moderate. And there might have been a time in our lives when we were able to do that. But if we need to, and we do, we need to diagnose alcoholism in ourselves. We look at our current lived experience. Is my current experience that today, once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take? Is my current experience today that when I try to stay sober on my own power, I can't do it today? Doesn't matter if I had a good stretch back in '84. Doesn't matter. What was 84 the LA? I know 88 was the Winter Olympics in Calgary. We had a good stretch for the Winter Olympics. I don't know when they had them in LA. I think that was 92. Anywho, focus. But I had a good stretch back then. What is my experience today? And so we're seeing the progressive nature of this illness. So back on 109, let's talk about number 2. Husband number 2. Drinker number 2. It goes on to say, your husband is showing lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. And so what we're talking about there is a sign of the obsession of the mind. He wants to stay sober. That's what by the way, the water wagon, that's what that means. It just means staying sober. I'm not hitting up the beer wagon or the whiskey wagon or the tequila wagon or the margarita wagon. And I wanted to get to one that had ice because I'm like, oh boy, they got to refrigerate that if it's got ice in it. I'm trying to stay on the water wagon. So this alcoholic wants to stay sober, but is finding themselves drinking again and again and again. And that is the obsession of the mind. And that, I'm going to emphasize and re-emphasize, that is the part of our illness which makes alcoholism hopeless. My problem is not that once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take. My problem is that I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, and yet I drink again. That is my problem. I go back to it again and again and again. And then it goes on to say, he often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. So when we talk about it getting entirely out of hand when drinking, what are we talking about? We're talking about the allergy of the body. So the allergy of the body happens when I am sober. When I am as sober as my brain was skipping back to the obsession. I got it wrong, which I'm sure is not a surprise for any of you guys. You're like, we know that. The allergy of the body happens once I take a drink. So once I consume alcohol in my body, the allergy of the body is the thing that sets off and tells me I need more. And the more I drink, the louder that more gets. So getting entirely out of hand when drinking, that is the allergy. I start to drink, and that first drink demands a second. And that second drink insists on 4. And that fourth drink will not relent until I've had 8. And the 8th drink is screaming at me until I've had 16. And so on, and so on, and so on. That out of hand as I start to drink and I overshoot the mark. I miss the mark. I cannot control the amount that I take, right? So that's the allergy. And what that allergy means, if we have experiences in our life of the allergy, we've got the allergy. If we had a peanut allergy, we wouldn't be debating about whether or not we had it. You know what I mean? We wouldn't be like, how much of that shellfish can I have with my seafood allergy? You know what I mean? We would say, I've got it and I've got it. And so if we've got the allergy, we've got the allergy. And what that means is that there will never be a time when I can ever safely drink again. And I emphasize this. The allergy of the body means that I can never ever drink again. But that first symptom that we read, unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to, that is the obsession of the mind. Now, the obsession of the mind happens when I'm sober. When I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated. The obsession of the mind happens. I am stone cold sober, and it is a thought that takes me back again and again to that first drink. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I just got to get it out of my system. it looks like that thought that is on me all day that says, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink. Until I finally, it feels like what I do is I give in. But what little in defense, there was no defense at all, is eroded away. But just as much as it's that, as it is the suddenlies. I'm out there living my life, and suddenly the thought comes to mind, and I got a drink in my hand. It looks like I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? And you see, the allergy of the body means that I cannot drink again. But the obsession of the mind means that I will drink again. And that is the hopelessness of alcoholism. That's the predicament that we find ourselves in if we have examples from our own lives of this thing, of the allergy, of the obsession, of times where we drank too much, and of times where we said, I don't want to do it again. I want to stay sober. I don't want to drink, only to find ourselves drinking again. And it says, he admits this is true. So we see when it says he admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. So he's getting a glimpse that he has a problem. Type 1, ain't got no problem. Type 2, starting to see that there is a problem. And if you guys have been coming around for a while, you guys know I emphasize hopeless then hope. It is that transition from hopeless to hope. And what I have found is that I need to have a lens. I need to see my hopelessness before I am able to accept the hope that is on offer. Type 1, that bad boy is not writing inventory. He's absolutely not. He's got no need. Making amends? He's not doing that. I got no problem. I got no need for a solution. I don't need any of that, right? Type 2, what we see is the beginnings of the awareness that there is a problem. It goes on to say he has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. So we can ask ourselves, did I try various means to moderate my drinking? Or to moderate the consequences of my drinking? What I mean by that is we are the type of people that will get a DUI and think, you know what? I need to stop driving. That's our response to that. Did we try to moderate either our drinking or the consequences, which is, I know I got to add a hand, so I'm going to drink alone, right? Did I try that? Did I try to exert some power and some control against the allergy of the body, and did it not work? And then did I try means of staying dry? Did I try various ways to stay dry, which would be things like, I'm just not going to drink, like that swearing off. Things like, going to the gym. You all know I had abs. Didn't lead to abstinence. I was ripped. Now, this is like 20 years ago, but I was ripped and I kept getting ripped, that didn't work. Did I try these things to stay sober? And did they fail? Now, if you're a little unsure, again, I want to remind you, if you're hanging out with me, you've tried other things. I promise you, they have not worked. I'm so glad you're here, but listen, I know what you tried had not worked if we're hanging out. So it says, he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware he cannot drink like other people. So what we're beginning to see, which comes in parallel with the awareness that he is a problem, is the consequences. My consequences do not make me an alcoholic, but my consequences can help me see that I'm in trouble. And so he's starting to get some consequences. It goes on to say, he sometimes drinks in the morning and through the day also to hold his nervousness in check. Now, when he drinks in the morning and throughout the day, that is a sign of the allergy. Do I know what it's like to start drinking and I'm not able to stop until we run out of booze, run out of options to get booze, I black out, I pass out? Can I relate to that? And then when it says to hold his nervousness in check, there are two things it could be referring to. The first thing it could be referring to is as a symptom of the physical allergy, which is when we wake up after we're on page 109. So glad you're here. 109, and we are on the second full paragraph. And so we drink, and we drink ourselves into a really awful hangover. We're in those, and some of you guys, I'm sure you guys know what a hangover's like. But you know that feeling the morning after where that anxiety is gripping your chest? So there's two things. One, he is drinking to hold in the morning, to hold that nervousness in check, the anxiety that comes as the result of the physical allergy and moving through that hangover withdrawal process. That is one example. So we're doubling down on the sign that this is the physical allergy. Now, the second thing that this could be is in reference to the spiritual malady. Now, the spiritual malady, I'll tell you what it looks like for me. I put down the bottle and the world starts to get gray. I put down the bottle. And I was describing this at the other study. I put down the bottle and it's like somebody took the volume of the world and cranked it to 11 and it's too much. I put down the bottle and I get this anxiety. It feels like somebody's stabbing my shoulder blades. I put down the bottle and I get that depression so bad I can't get out of bed. I put down the bottle and I experience that sense of pain and emptiness and loneliness that nothing can touch. My skin doesn't fit. I feel like I'm a raw exposed nerve ending, and for some ungodly reason, the wind is blowing. I put down the bottle and I'm suicidal. Now that does not make me an alcoholic, because there are people who have the spiritual malady who are not alcoholic. But I mention that for a couple reasons. One, if you're here today and you're sober and you feel like that, and you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, Paige. What I want you to know is Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps that bring about the spiritual awakening. The sole purpose is to treat that. To treat that. That's what we are treating. And so if you're here today, that's what the steps are for. That's what the steps will help with. Yeah, I came here and I thought I was, it was one of my andas, alcoholic anda, alcoholic yeah, but, sprinkling some yeah, buts. I thought that's what made me different. And so it is possible that he is drinking to hold that nervousness in check, the spiritual malady. But regardless, I need the spiritual solution that we have. So I'll keep going. So it goes on to say, he is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how we can drink moderately next time. Now, when it says he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time, that is the obsession of the mind. And what we are describing in those last few sentences is the cycle of alcoholism. And if I did a good job of keying this thing up, I did better than normal. Oh, hold on. I normally put me in the corner. Well, whatever. I normally put me in a corner. That joke, nobody puts baby in the corner. I'll go in the corner. So what we're talking about is the alcoholic goes on this spree. The physical allergy takes us on the spree and we emerge remorseful, coming to with that feeling of remorse and regret, that guilt and that shame. And I cannot believe I've done it again. And that fuels me to say those infamous words, never again. I'm never going to drink again. And if you're wondering whether or not you're an alcoholic, have you ever said those words? And have those words stopped working? You see, for an alcoholic, I will never drink again does not have an effect. You see, I will say, that's it, I'm never going to drink again. And I'm thrust into the spiritual malady. I'm thrust into the restless, irritable discontent. I'm thrust into, man, it is me on me. And I describe it like bone on bone. We've got no cartilage. It is me on me. And I can't stand the way that I'm feeling. And I just need some relief. And my mind remembers a time when I had relief. And so my mind lies to me. And it tells me I can drink moderately this time. It tells me I don't need to stay on the water wagon. It tells me this time will be different. And I believe the lie. And off I go. I take that first drink. And that first drink sets off that physical allergy. And I go on a spree. And a spree is a day, a week, a month, several years. It's any length of time that I'm drinking. But that spree comes to an end and I come to filled and fueled by guilt and shame and remorse. And I say that I'm never going to do it again. And I mean it. I mean it. And then I'm left with me. And I've got nothing I can put between me and me. And it is painful. And I get a thought. This time will be different. And off I go. And so when it says, we think this person is in danger, these are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. So the earmarks of an alcoholic is the inability to control the amount once I start to drink, and the inability to stay sober when I want to stay sober. And I will say sometimes the mental obsession looks like, no, I just changed my mind. But that is alcoholism. This cycle is alcoholism. I say I'm never going to do it again. I'm going to go on the water wagon, and I do it again. And so when we talk about the spiritual malady, what I'm after is relief. And I have an illness which demands treatment. Alcoholism demands treatment. It demands it. It's not going to ask nicely. And it is either going to be treated with a drink, or if you're somebody like me, I will also attempt to treat it with suicide, or I will treat it with a spiritual awakening. And what I need to find is something that is as powerful as alcohol. I need to find something that works as well on that spiritual malady as alcohol. And that's what we have. Everything that I was looking for in the bottle, I found in the spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps. So the order is, I work the 12 steps to have a spiritual awakening. And that's how we get off the cycle. And so if I'm stuck in the cycle, if I'm drowning in the cycle, if I'm struggling in the cycle, what do I need to do? How do I get free? I take the 12 steps, and they will produce a spiritual awakening, which again gives me everything that I was looking for in the bottle. And so when it says this person is in real danger, these are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. An alcoholic. To have alcoholism is exactly, I have to, I need to, I want to stay sober, but I cannot stay sober. That's alcoholism. But it goes on to say, perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. Still got the job, still got the car, still got the house, still got the marriage, got a bad case of the still got him, hasn't lost him, right? And it says, he has by no means ruined everything. As we say amongst ourselves, he wants to stop. So type 2, make no bones about it, has alcoholism, because the two symptoms that we need to diagnose it, the allergy and the obsession, they are there, they are present. But the consequences have not directed his pain. And so this is type 3. Spoilers, type 3. Also an alcoholic. They're all alcoholics from here on in. But what is going to change is the level of hopelessness. Now, I also want to be very clear. The level of hopelessness does not have to be in proportion to external consequences. I can feel that based on those internal consequences, the guilt and the shame and the self-loathing. I never had a DUI. To be fair, I never had a driver's license, but y'all know the real ones. You don't need even a driver's license to get a DUI. It is, how did I feel on the inside? So, type 3. This husband has gone much further than husband number 2. So the consequences are ranking. The progression has continued. Though, once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. So you know all those still gotta, don't got those no more. We're losing some of these things. Some of the things that we were using to tell ourselves, I don't have a problem, I still go to work. I don't have a problem, I still got this. I don't have a problem, I still got that. So the things that I am using to hold on to the delusion are slipping away. And again, why would I hold on to the delusion that I don't have a problem? Because alcohol provides me with the relief that I desperately need. I demand relief. My illness demands treatment, and I seek it through the 12 steps to produce a spiritual awakening. Today is to seek it in the bottle, obviously. All right. So it says, maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. Rehabs, detoxes, emergency rooms, psych wards, treatment centers, sober living facilities, drunk takes, jails. Have we been through those? Institutions. Institutions is where the door locks from the inside. You know, you're not able to get out. And if you're like, I don't know if I've ever been in an institution. Another way to decide if you've been in an institution, not just the door won't let you leave, but also they make you make your bed. They make you make your bed. That is an institution. So the weary round of treatment centers, rehabs, jails, all of that sort of stuff, right? We're seeing that progression. We're seeing the consequences. It says he admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. And so that is that inability. So he cannot drink like other people. That is the allergy of the body. I cannot control it. But when it says he clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so, that is the obsession of the mind. Oh, yeah, sure. Wait 1 second. Hold on. Where are you? There you are. I gotcha. Hold on. Boom. Gotcha. All right. I'm doing the multitasking. And we know I'm so good at multitasking. That's not going to be a problem when I'm trying to do too many things at once. I'm so good at it. All right. So let's pop over. Let's make a note to see page 30. Because I like bouncing around because this idea that these are not unique suggestions. These are suggestions that we've seen again and again. So that idea that he clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. And on page 30, what we see is it's in the first full paragraph at the very start. And what we're going to do is look near the end of that first full paragraph where it says, the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. So we can see that we have a problem, but we're not, we got to do science. We're trying to do science to figure out, like we are running experiments. Maybe if I start drinking at this time, have water in between, do this, don't drink with that person, do some non-conference approved dry goods in the middle, like all these things to try to control and enjoy our drinking. That's what type 3 is talking about, right? He clings to the notion that he will find a way to do so, finding a way to drink without the consequences. And here's the thing, we could hold our experience up to this light. If I am controlling it, I'm not enjoying it. So imagine, actually, I don't think this was in Calgary, but there was a place where you could live in a facility, and what they would do is they would give you alcohol to drink each day. And so imagine you're living in a facility. I guess you have to make your bed, but they're going to give you alcohol, so fair enough. So you live in the facility, and they give you 2 drinks a day. Does that sound like that would be fun for anyone? Or would you be tearing up your bed sheets to string them together to shimmy out the window so that you can get drunk? Because there is nothing, those times where your loved one is telling you, like, we're going to this holiday party. What I need you to do is only 2 drinks or 3 drinks. And so what we do, we have those 3 drinks, and we are miserable and just holding on until we can get home and drink how we want to. Does that sound familiar? Or you're at a thing where your spouse or partner, whoever, was like, you can do not drink, or only have 1 or 3, and then we end up sneaking drinks. I'll just throw it out there. If it's not a problem, I don't gotta sneak it. So if I'm sneaking it, it's a sign I got a problem with it. So going back to page 110, that idea that I'm constantly seeking to control and enjoy. And the truth is, if I'm enjoying my drinking, there's no control. When I want to drink how I want to drink, man, I don't want to drink with other people. You're just going to get in my way. The activity is the afterthought. The event is drinking, So I'm after something that we can see in this moment is impossible. But on page 110, we can't see that. We cannot see what is true from what is false. So it is the obsession of the mind. The obsession of the mind that says, it's a fancy cocktail party. I'm only going to have 3 cocktails. Or I'm going to have a big meal before. Or I'm going to, whatever it is. The obsession of the mind. So it goes on to say on page 110, he may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop. And so what are we seeing? Type 1, I don't got no problem. I don't need no solution. Get off my back, y'all don't know me. Type 2, we're seeing some real problems, but they're not open to a solution. Type 3 is trying and really trying things to get sober and stay sober, and it is not working, and there is a desperation to stop. So we're seeing the progression, not just of the illness, but we're seeing a progression of willingness. And it says, his case presents additional questions, which we shall try to answer for you. And this line is important and counterintuitive to what we might think if we don't understand alcoholism. It says, you can be quite hopeful in a situation like this. Hopeful. This is the dude who's been in and out of treatment like 8 times. It's like, hopeful. You can be hopeful for this. And that's counterintuitive. Because with most illnesses, if you've got a bad strain of it, that's not very hopeful. You want a milder case. We would think type 1, you have the most hope. Heck, they might not even be an alcoholic. But the hope comes from that hopelessness. Because when I can see my real predicament as an alcoholic, then I'm able and willing and able to grab a hold of the hope that is on offer. So the more hopeless I am, the more likely I'm able to grab a hold of the hope. 4. Now this is type 4. You may have a husband of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution or another. Now, these were institutions that these are long-term stays. This was, to be fair, it was before electroshock therapy and it was before lobotomies. But think that sort of treatment, these were not good places to end up. It says he is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Now we can ask ourselves, anyone here ever go to rehab? Get drunk on the way home from rehab? Go to detox, get drunk on the way home from detox? And some of y'all didn't even wait to get home. You were sneaking the drinks in treatment and off you went, Yeah. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens. So those serious withdrawal symptoms where, you have shakes, you can have hallucinations, and you can have seizures. And the seizures are what makes it fatal, or what makes it potentially fatal. It's very, very serious. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. So the doctors are like, we don't even know what to do. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. They got well. It is not about how far down the scale we have gone. Regardless of how bad it is, we can recover. And in fact, it is often easier to recover when we see, man, I am in trouble. I don't got an answer for this. I don't got a solution. Than it is. It's kind of like, when you're sponsoring people and your sponsee comes to you and they're like, I've got a plan. It's like, oh no, there's nothing worse than a drunk with a plan. Oh no, like, do not lend them money. You're not going to see them or it again. No. But when I know that when I've sat down with a sponsee who's relapsed and they're crying and I'm like, yes. Because in this moment, they're cracked open. In this moment, that window of willingness is open, at least just enough that they might be able to take action. But here's what I got to do. I got to do this, got to go to school, got to get a job, got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. Ugh, that's tough. That's tough. They got a plan, So the more hopeless, the better. So now is when we're going to transition to the directions on how to best help each person based on severity, but more importantly, based on willingness. And actually, what I will say, and I want to kind of tie the bow on this thread of thought. At the beginning, I said controversially, not super, but a little controversially, that these 4 types are more useful than the 5 in the doctor's opinion. Now, here's why. You guys can hold up your finger, do a finger count. What type of drinker do you think you were? Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Hold up your hands, you tell me. And not a lot of audience participation on that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so here's what I found. Instantly, people will give me a 3 or a 4. Instantly. Now, when we break down the 5 types, I've got to explain them a lot more for us to see. Oh yeah. Usually reading on our own the 5 types in the doctor's opinion, I'm like, I'm not a psychopath. That just meant mentally ill person in the 1930s. It's like, that's not me. And so this is really helpful. We can see ourselves in this. So now here are the directions to help these people based on their level of severity, but just as importantly, if not more, their level of willingness. And this is how we can apply this to other areas of our life. Even if we're not the untreated Al-Anon, even if we are not the person is bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol, these are principles that we are going to be able to apply to anyone. And again, so when at the start, I said, who wrote this chapter? It was Bill. Bill wrote this chapter. Bill was always going to write this chapter. He didn't want Ann to write it. He wanted Ann Smith to write a story in the back. Bill had every intention of writing this chapter. Now, if you hear that and you're like, that's a stupid, jerky, mansplaining thing to do, fair enough. Yeah, probably. But let's contextualize Bill Wilson as a human being. Bill Wilson, as a human being, was really, in many ways, driven by a singleness of purpose. And he wanted to help alcoholics. That's what he wanted more than anything else. And so this chapter is how can I be most helpful to them? So that's the context. So what is going to be helpful? It says, now let's go back to husband number 1. So this is Mr. I ain't got no problem. I don't need your solution. Get off my back. Y'all, when I was a kid, I used to miss a lot of school. I would take little mental health days, and I would stay at home, and for a period of it, I would watch Maury Povich, the Maury Show, and they'd have those kids that are like, I'm a bad kid, y'all don't know me, and there's something about that that's etched in my brain, and so I just imagine like one of the people on the Maury Show is type 1, like, you don't know me, I don't have a problem. That's the visual that happens in my brain, and I'm so sorry to share that visual with you. All right, so let's go back to number 1. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with. It is harder to deal with somebody who does not think or believe they have a problem. And heck, they might not even have a problem yet, or at least a hopeless problem yet. If somebody's concerned about it, we've got enough of a problem, we should look at it. So, he enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. You have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before your fire. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We have had a good time. And so what I think they're trying to sort of navigate is some of the political contention around the Prohibition era. So what we're saying is there was a lot of prejudice about alcohol and drinking, and there was, for many, many, many years in the United States, a push to make alcohol illegal, and it was even successful for a period of time, and then the 18th Amendment was repealed. And so it was a contentious thing, and being told not to drink was something that was a little touchy even for non-alcoholics. So we're saying, like, hey, it's fine. Yes, you even want to drink with them. We're not shaming alcohol. That's kind of the lens through this paragraph. And then we know all about liquor as a social lubricant. Now, I'm not going to recommend you do this, but when I was in early sobriety and people would ask me to drink, and I also contextualize it with I was in my early 20s. No, that's not a good context, because I would say this now. Never mind. I was gonna hide it under or pad it with the folly of youth. No, I would say this now. But people were like, Paige, do you want to have a drink? Want to come out for drinks? And I would say, oh no, thank you. Alcohol is a social lubricant, and I'm lubed up enough already. Which is not socially acceptable. Don't say that. That's an in your mind sort of thing. All right. Some of us, but not all of us, see, again, trying to sort of navigate that stormy political issue, think it has its advantages when reasonably used. And now at the top of page 111, what we are going to get into is what I like to call the 6 principles of success. I call them that, but I think that's what they are. So, so we are going to talk about 6 principles, 6 actions to take to help somebody who does not think they have a problem and they're not open to a solution. That's the context. So the first principle of success, this is principle 1, is that you should never be angry. That's principle 1. Now, when we hear this out of context and we just sort of read it, it's like, oh, yeah, you just want the wife to sit at home and put up with that person's, garbage and don't be angry. No, but here's the thing. First and foremost, have any of you ever been scolded and approached with anger in regards to your drinking? And did that help one iota? You get mad at me? Oh, that destroys me, but it doesn't lead to positive permanent change. I don't deal well with conflict. I'm still needed approval. But that destroys me. It doesn't work. Now, here's the thing. two wives does not exist in a vacuum, as we're going to see in the second half of Two Wives. Yeah, that's right. There's a whole different aspects and elements of this chapter. We're going to see that it is recommended, and actually one of the principles of success is it is recommended that whoever I am, if I'm concerned about another person, what I need to do is work the steps myself. And so if I know that that is a part of this thing, it is not pretend I'm angry and suppress, or not angry and suppress my anger and stuff, and then bake muffins. I'll bake my spite into the muffins. You don't want my muffins. They're spiteful. Like that. Like we sort of imagine that's the context. No. It is we will be angry. We will be frustrated. So it is asking that I utilize what the tools, the actions that have been given us to navigate this. So I will be angry. Let's do some inventory. I will be angry. Let's utilize the 10th step. I will be angry. Let's catch things in the evening review so that we are not bringing the anger to the person, because that doesn't work. That changes the message. So it says, even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily, it's not saying sit there and put up with it. If you need to leave, and I will say temporarily, because man, if you're reading this chapter because you have a loved one that has alcoholism, you're not able to leave. I mean, we have people who have alcoholism that are dying and have a hard time wanting to read this book, which I don't get. This thing's fun. I do enjoy. I do enjoy. All right. So even if you have to leave them temporarily, you should, if you can, go without rancor. And that rancor is that bitterness and that resentment. So to be calm, to be neutral. That's what it's talking about. Not operating from a place of anger. And again, it does not work. And as we bounced last week, we went to 66 and 67 and we spoke about it doesn't work for any human being on earth. It's not helpful to live in anger and resentment. So it goes on to say, patience and good temper are most necessary. Well, where do those things come from? Because I have not been able, if I am looking for patience and good temper in myself, it's like a Where's Waldo exercise and there was no Waldo. I'm not finding it, I need God's patience. I need God's temperament to flow through me. And how do I do that? I have to clear myself out of the way and allow this power to flow through me. So again, that's how we get there. And in those early days, Alcoholics Anonymous, even before it was Alcoholics Anonymous, but even in those early days, they offered this way of life to the family because everyone that was affected could utilize the solution we have. The 12 steps, and just as importantly, really the spiritual awakening, that's what treats that spiritual malady. And again, alcoholics are not the only ones who have a spiritual malady. Those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol are fueled by that same conscious sense of separateness from God. And it is only a sense because I can never truly be separate from God. But that's what it feels like. And they have that too. And so the solution will work for them too. The solution will work for anyone. Okay, so our next thought. So this is going to be principle number 2. Principle number 2. It says, our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking. And it might be like, hey, wait a minute. Now, bear with me. Does that mean we can't set boundaries? No, of course you can set boundaries. Boundaries aren't about controlling the other person's behavior. Boundaries are about setting your own limits. And I'll throw this out there, has anyone here ever been told what they must do about their drinking? And how did that go? Was it effective? You've got to burp. Didn't work. It didn't work. And then it says, if he gets the idea that you are a nag or a killjoy, your chance of accomplishing anything useful may be zero. Has anyone ever been nagged, even if it wasn't about our alcoholism? Has anyone been nagged about putting your socks in the laundry hamper and that be effective? I gotta have a deep inner desire for change. And I use that because that's something, you nag about, you might. But it's that, that it does not work. Nagging does not work. And I shared this, I think it was here, but I remember I was reading, there's a wonderful AA member out of North Dakota. Her name's Judith R. And she would post these little like meditation reader things that she wrote. And in it, she spoke about nonviolence. And she described several violent actions. And one of them was nagging. And that blew me open because I had never seen nagging as violent. But when I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, that is, like, I just saw the truth about it. It doesn't work. When I'm nagging, I'm trying to play God in your life and control you and get you to be who I think I need you to be. And it says, he will use this as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood. This may lead to some lonely evenings for you. He may seek someone else to console him, not always another man. Now that, again, is there's some lines in here. No worries. Thank you so much for coming. And I got to wrap it up in a minute anyway, so you're not going to miss much. Have a wonderful night. Don't worry, I got eye on the time, Vivian. That is a tough line. It's like, whoa, are you saying if I nag, that's going to cause my husband to cheat? And that's kind of how we read it. And it's like, no, people are going to cheat because that's what they're going to do. But it's that idea that I have an illness that is so awful that the people who love me and care about me are doing anything and everything they can to try to save my life. And I'm so frustrated by it, I take it out on them. That's how awful this illness is. That's how destructive this illness is, not just in my life, but in the lives of those around me. Now, what I'm going to end on is, if you don't mind making a note to see page 90 and page 91. And what we're going to do really quickly is we're going to bounce over to page 90 and 91, which is in working with others. And what we're going to look at, now I'm going to do this quickly because I gotta wrap it up. So it talks about on page 90, where it's like very bottom paragraph. If he does not want to see you, bottom paragraph, page 90, never force yourself upon him. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout, where you might place this book, where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things. But urge them not to be over anxious, for that might spoil matters. And again, it says, usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach through the doctor or an institution is a better bet. And so the thrust of what it's talking about there is that this is not a new idea. We have our walls up with family. There's something about family. We just can't hear them. So nagging doesn't work. But again, those are the walls that we put up that hurt those that love us the most. So come back next week, please. Or you do you. I'm not going to make you, but please. And we're going to talk about the other principles of success. So I'll toss it over to you, Vivian.